The auction block was no place for snowflakes, but they fell anyway, dusting Penelope Carson's dark hair and pale cheeks as rough hands shoved her forward into the bitter December wind of 1876. She stumbled in her thin cotton dress, bare feet scraping against frozen wood, and felt 100 eyes crawling over her like insects as the auctioneer's voice boomed across the crowd, gathered in the Mountain Pass camp that served as a temporary trading post between Colorado and New Mexico territories. Her father's debts had become her chains, and now she stood trembling while men called out prices for her indenture as if she were livestock. The snow kept falling, each flake a cold kiss against skin already numb from more than just weather, and she kept her eyes fixed on the horizon where dark pines met darker sky, willing herself to disappear into that vast wilderness rather than face whatever came next. The bidding was brief and brutal. A saloon owner from Denver offered $50, a ranch foreman countered with $75, then a voice cut through the cold air like a warm blade, deep and steady and somehow angry. $200. Cash. Penelope's gaze jerked toward the voice. A man stood apart from the main crowd, tall and broad-shouldered in a worn leather coat and black hat pulled low against the snow. She could not see his eyes clearly from this distance, but she felt them on her, not leering like the others, but assessing in a different way entirely. The auctioneer, a rat-faced man named Sullivan, grinned wide enough to show his missing teeth. $200 going once, twice, sold to the Cowboy. Sullivan grabbed Penelope's arm hard enough to bruise. Come collect your property, mister. The Cowboy approached with slow, deliberate steps, his boots crunching through the gathering snow. As he drew closer, Penelope could finally see his face beneath the hat brim. He was younger than she expected, perhaps 25 or 26, with a strong jaw shadowed by several days of stubble and eyes the color of summer grass, despite the winter all around them. There was something fierce in those eyes, but also something protective, and when he looked at her, really looked at her, she felt her breath catch for reasons that had nothing to do with the cold. He counted out the money into Sullivan's greedy palm without taking his eyes off Penelope. She has papers, indenture contract, 7 years to pay off her daddy's debts of $163. Sullivan thrust a folded document at him. She is yours to do with as you please within the law, of course. No permanent harm, no killing, standard terms. The Cowboy took the papers and finally looked away from Penelope to scan the cramped handwriting. His jaw tightened. Then he shrugged out of his coat, and before Penelope could process what was happening, he draped the heavy leather around her shoulders. The warmth trapped in the fabric from his body heat enveloped her like an embrace, and she gasped. Can you walk? His voice was gentler now, directed at her alone. I have no shoes. Her own voice came out hoarse from disuse. She had not spoken in 2 days. Without a word, the Cowboy bent and scooped her up into his arms as if she weighed nothing at all. Penelope made a startled sound and instinctively grabbed at his shirt. What are you doing? Getting you out of this damned snow. He turned and started walking toward a sturdy gray horse tied to a post near the edge of the camp. Name is Vincent Frost, by the way. Figure you should know who owns your contract. Penelope Carson. She felt strange saying her own name as if it belonged to someone else now. Perhaps it did. Perhaps the girl who had been Penelope Carson had died the moment her father sold her to pay his gambling debts and whiskey bills. Vincent settled her onto his horse with surprising care, then swung up behind her. His arms came around her to grip the reins, creating a cage of warmth and strength that made something in Penelope's chest ache with a feeling she could not name. She had expected cruelty, expected violence or violation, or at the very least cold indifference. She had not expected this careful handling, as if she were something precious rather than property. "Where are we going?" she asked as Vincent urged the horse forward, away from the auction block and the leering men and the terrible place where her old life had ended. Val Verde, Texas. Vincent's breath was warm against her ear, and she shivered for an entirely different reason than cold. "It is a long ride, about 3 weeks if the weather holds and we do not hit trouble. We will stop in Santa Fe first to get you proper clothes and boots. Can't have you freezing to death before we even make it home." Home. The word struck Penelope as impossibly foreign. She had not had a real home in years, not since her mother died and her father descended into the bottle. They had drifted from town to town, staying in boarding houses and cheap hotels, always one step ahead of debt collectors, until finally there was nowhere left to run. "Why did you buy my contract?" The question escaped before she could stop it. $200 is far more than my debt. You could have gotten someone else for less." Vincent was quiet for a long moment as the horse picked its way down the snowy trail. Around them, the forest was hushed and white, beautiful in a merciless way. Finally, he said, "Saw you standing up there with snow melting on your face, looking like you wanted to fade away into nothing. Reminded me of someone. Besides, no woman deserves to be sold like cattle, and I had the money to make sure you did not end up with one of those other bastards." Sullivan's auctions are notorious. Half the women sold there end up dead or worse within a year. "So you bought me out of pity." Penelope was not sure if she felt grateful or humiliated. "I bought you because it was the right thing to do." Vincent's voice was firm. "And because I need help running my ranch. My housekeeper quit last month to move back east with her daughter, and I cannot cook worth a damn." "You will earn your keep honest, Penelope Carson, and when your 7 years are up, you will be free to go wherever you please with money in your pocket and a reference in your hand. That is the deal." It was more than Penelope had dared to hope for. She sagged back against Vincent's chest, suddenly exhausted. "I can cook and clean. I am a hard worker." "Good." She felt rather than saw his nod. "Then we will get along just fine. Now rest if you can. We have a lot of miles to cover." Penelope closed her eyes and let the rhythm of the horse's gait lull her. The snow had stopped falling, and through the clouds, she could see hints of sky beginning to brighten. Behind Vincent's solid presence, she felt something she had not felt in a very long time. Not happiness exactly, not yet, but perhaps the distant possibility of it. The faint hope that somewhere beyond these frozen mountains, there might be sunshine waiting. They rode until dusk before making camp in a sheltered hollow, beneath an overhang of rock that kept the worst of the wind at bay. Vincent lifted Penelope down from the horse, and she bit back a gasp as her bare feet touched snow-dusted ground. He noticed immediately and cursed under his breath. "Sit on that rock. Do not move." Penelope obeyed, watching as Vincent efficiently unsaddled the horse and set about building a fire. He moved with the easy confidence of someone who had done this 1,000 times, and within minutes, warm flames were crackling against the gathering darkness. He dug through his saddlebags and produced a pair of thick wool socks. "They will be too big, but better than nothing." He knelt in front of her, and Penelope's eyes widened as he took one of her feet in his hands. His palms were rough with calluses but warm, and he examined her foot with a frown. "No frostbite yet, thank God. You are lucky." "I do not feel very lucky." The words came out more bitter than she intended. Vincent looked up at her, and in the firelight his eyes were very green and very serious. "You are alive. You are not with a man who would hurt you, and you will have shoes by tomorrow night. That is more luck than most people in your situation get." He was right, of course, but Penelope still felt the injustice of it burning in her throat. "My father did this, Sold his own daughter like I was nothing. I hate him for it. Hate is a heavy thing to carry. Vincent pulled the socks onto her feet with gentle efficiency. But you are entitled to it. Just do not let it eat you alive. What would you carry instead? Penelope heard the challenge in her own voice. If someone you loved sold you. Vincent sat back on his heels, his expression distant. My father died in the war. My mother followed a year later from fever. I raised my little sister on my own from the time I was 16 until she was grown enough to marry. Then she moved to California with her husband, and I have not seen her in 3 years, so I carry missing. Which is maybe not so different from hate, just quieter. The honesty in his words disarmed her completely. Penelope found herself studying his face in the shifting firelight, seeing the lines of old grief carved there alongside the strength. He was not much older than her own 20 years, but he had clearly lived harder. I am sorry about your family. And I am sorry about yours. Vincent stood and moved to his saddlebags again. But we are both still here, so we make the best of it. Now I have jerky and hardtack for supper. Nothing fancy, but it will keep you going. They ate in companionable silence, and afterward, Vincent spread out bedrolls on opposite sides of the fire. He saw Penelope's wary look and said quietly, I am not going to touch you. The contract might say I own your labor, but nobody owns another person, not really. You will sleep safe, Penelope. I give you my word. That night, wrapped in blankets that smelled of horse and leather, and something uniquely Vincent, Penelope stared up at the stars visible through a break in the clouds and felt the tight knot of fear in her chest loosen just slightly. Across the fire, Vincent's breathing had already evened into sleep, and she marveled at how he could trust her, a stranger enough to let his guard down so completely. Or perhaps it was not trust, but simply confidence that she posed no threat to a man his size. She must have slept eventually because she woke to gray dawn and the smell of coffee. Vincent was already up, tending the fire and heating water in a battered tin pot. When he saw her stirring, he nodded toward the trees. There is a creek about 50 yards that way if you need to wash up. Water is cold but clean. We will ride hard today to make Santa Fe by nightfall. The journey resumed with Penelope once again settled in front of Vincent on the big gray horse. As they descended from the high mountain pass, the snow gradually gave way to scrubby pine and then to the high desert landscape of New Mexico territory. The air warmed, and by midday, Penelope had shrugged off Vincent's coat. He took it without comment and tied it behind the saddle. Tell me about Val Verde, Penelope said, needing to fill the silence with something other than the thunder of her own thoughts. What is it like? Small. Maybe 300 people if you count the outlying ranches. We have a main street with a general store, a saloon, a church, a sheriff's office, and a doctor who is drunk more often than sober but does decent work when he is clear-headed. The land is good for cattle, plenty of grass and water from the river. My ranch is about 5 miles outside town, 800 acres. I run about 200 head of cattle with the help of 3 hired hands. The house is nothing special, but it is solid and has a good well. It sounds nice. And it did, in a way Penelope had not expected. After years of rootless drifting, the idea of a real place to live, even as an indentured servant, held a strange appeal. It is hard work, Vincent warned. The Texas sun is brutal in summer and the winters can turn mean fast, but the land does not lie to you and it rewards honest effort. I have built something there, something I am proud of, and now you will help me keep it running. There was no arrogance in his words, just simple fact. Penelope appreciated that. She was tired of pretty lies and broken promises. Give her hard truths any day. They reached Santa Fe as the sun was setting, painting the adobe buildings in shades of gold and amber. Vincent led the horse directly to a general store that was just closing up. The proprietor, a stout woman with shrewd eyes and graying hair, took one look at Penelope and tusked. "Auction?" she asked Vincent bluntly. "Yes, madam." Vincent did not bother denying it. "She needs everything. Boots, dresses, undergarments, a coat, a hat. Whatever she needs to survive Texas weather and ranch work. Send the bill to my account." The woman, who introduced herself as Mrs. Hernandez, ushered Penelope into the back room and spent the next hour outfitting her with brutal efficiency. By the time they emerged, Penelope was wearing a sturdy calico dress in deep blue, wool stockings, leather boots that actually fit, and a warm shawl. Mrs. Hernandez had also packed a carpet bag with 2 more dresses, a nightgown, a comb, soap, and various other necessities. Vincent's eyes widened slightly when he saw her. "You clean up nice," he said, then seemed to catch himself and cleared his throat. "I mean, you look warmer, more comfortable." Penelope felt heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the warm store. "Thank you for all of this. You did not have to spend so much. Consider it an investment in my ranch," Vincent said gruffly, but his eyes were kind. "Come on, we will get a room at the boarding house for tonight. You can have a real bed and a hot meal." The boarding house was clean and respectable, and Vincent paid for 2 separate rooms without being asked. They ate supper in the common room with the other guests, and Penelope marveled at the simple pleasure of hot stew and fresh bread. Across the table, Vincent watched her eat with an expression she could not quite read. "When did you last have a proper meal?" he asked quietly. "I am not sure. A week, maybe more." Penelope took another bite, trying not to shovel the food too quickly despite her hunger. "My father spent the last of our money on cards and whiskey. We had been living on scraps for days before he finally sold me." Vincent's jaw tightened. "He is not going to come looking for you. I made sure of that before I left the auction. Paid Sullivan to make it clear that the contract is ironclad and any interference would be dealt with harshly. Your father has no claim on you anymore." It should have felt like freedom, but mostly it just felt like abandonment. Penelope pushed the thought away and focused on her meal. She could mourn her father's love, or lack thereof, later. Right now she needed to keep her strength up for the long journey still ahead. That night, alone in her small but clean room, Penelope undressed down to the new nightgown and climbed between sheets that smelled of lye soap and sunshine. Through the thin wall, she could hear Vincent moving around in the next room, the creak of floorboards and the rustle of fabric. She wondered what he was thinking, whether he regretted his impulsive purchase, whether he was as aware of her as she had become of him over the past 2 days. It was ridiculous, of course. He had bought her contract. He was her legal master for the next 7 years, even if he seemed determined to treat her more like an employee than property. Any feelings beyond professional courtesy would be inappropriate at best, dangerous at worst. And yet when she closed her eyes, she could still feel the warmth of his arms around her on the horse, could still hear the gentleness in his voice when he promised she would be safe. Penelope pressed her face into the pillow and told herself firmly that gratitude was not the same as affection. She barely knew Vincent Frost. He was simply a means to survival, nothing more. But her treacherous heart beat a little faster when she heard his footsteps in the hallway, and she did not fall asleep until long after his room had gone silent. The journey south resumed at dawn. They followed the old trade routes through New Mexico territory, stopping each night to camp under the vast open sky. Vincent proved to be an easy traveling companion, neither talkative nor sullen, simply present. He taught Penelope how to build a proper fire, how to read the landscape for water sources, how to tell by the stars which direction they were heading. "You never know when you might need these skills," he said one evening, as he showed her how to tie a secure knot in their supply rope. Out here, knowledge can be the difference between living and dying. His hands covered hers, guiding her fingers through the motions, and Penelope found it hard to concentrate on the lesson. His touch was firm but never rough, and she was hyper-aware of every point of contact between them. When the knot was finally tied properly, Vincent pulled back and nodded approval. "Quick learner. That is good. I have had to be." Penelope flexed her fingers, trying to dispel the tingling sensation his touch had left behind. "What happened to your last housekeeper?" "You said she left to go back east, Mrs. Patterson. She worked for me for 3 years, good woman, tough as old leather. But her daughter in Boston had a baby and wanted her mother close. I could not begrudge her that." Vincent poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks swirling up into the darkness. "She kept the house running smooth, cooked for the ranch hands, managed the garden and the chickens. It has been chaos since she left. The hands have been taking turns cooking, and we have all suffered for it." "How many hands do you have?" "3 full-time. Miguel is the oldest, been with me since I bought the ranch 5 years ago. Then there is Charlie, who is young but works hard, and Tom, who is good with horses. They are decent men. They will treat you respectful or answer to me." The protective edge in his voice sent a warm flutter through Penelope's stomach. She was not used to anyone defending her, not since her mother died. "I am sure they are fine, and I promise I will earn my keep. I am good at cooking and cleaning, and I learn fast like you said. I am not worried." Vincent's eyes met hers across the fire. "You have steel in you, Penelope Carson. I could see it even when you were standing on that auction block looking like a ghost. You have been beaten down, but you are not broken. That kind of strength is rare." Penelope did not know what to say to that. No one had ever called her strong before. She had always been the useless daughter, the burden, the problem to be solved. But when Vincent looked at her, he seemed to see someone different, someone capable and valuable. It was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. "What about you?" she asked, deflecting. "How did you end up in Texas? You said you raised your sister. Where did you grow up?" "Missouri originally. My father fought for the Union and died at Wilson's Creek in '61. I was 12, my sister was 6. My mother did her best, but the war took everything from us. She died when I was 16, and I took my sister west to get away from the memories. We drifted for a while, doing odd jobs until I saved enough to buy the ranch. Mary, that is my sister. She lived with me until she met her husband. He is a banker in San Francisco, does well for himself. She writes me letters, tells me about her life. It sounds nice, but it is not for me. I need open space, need work that means something. I understand that." And Penelope did, surprisingly. Despite everything, despite the circumstances that had brought her here, there was something appealing about the idea of building a life through honest work on land that stretched as far as the eye could see. "I have never had anything that was really mine. Even before my father sold me, we never stayed anywhere long enough to call it home. But maybe in Val Verde I can have that, even if it is just for 7 years. Maybe it can be for longer." Vincent's voice was careful, almost hesitant. "When your contract is up, I mean. If you wanted to stay on as a paid employee, or do something else in town. Val Verde could use a school teacher if you can read and write well enough, or the general store is always looking for help. What I am trying to say is, you will have options. You do not have to disappear once you are free." The thought of staying, of making a real life in Val Verde, made something in Penelope's chest expand painfully. It was too much to hope for, surely. But the way Vincent was looking at her, steady and sincere in the firelight, made her want to believe. "I would like that," she said softly. "To have options, to have a future that I choose." Vincent smiled then, a real smile that transformed his usually serious face into something almost boyish. "Then that is what you will have. I promise you, Penelope. By the time your 7 years are up, you will have saved enough money and built enough connections to do whatever makes you happy. You will only know sunshine from here on out. No more standing in the snow waiting to be sold." The echo of his words from that first day struck Penelope with unexpected force. You will only know sunshine now. At the time, she had barely registered them, too numb with shock and fear to process anything beyond simple survival. But hearing him repeat the sentiment now, with conviction and warmth, made her realize he had meant it even then. From the very beginning, Vincent had been trying to tell her that her life was about to change for the better. "Thank you," she whispered, and the words carried the weight of every emotion she could not quite name. Gratitude, yes, but also something deeper, something that felt dangerously like affection blooming in the space between them. They crossed into Texas on the 10th day of travel, and Penelope noticed the change immediately. The air was warmer, drier, carrying the scent of sage and dust. The landscape flattened into rolling plains dotted with scrub brush and the occasional twisted mesquite tree. Above them, the sky stretched impossibly wide and blue, so different from the heavy gray clouds of the Colorado mountains where she had been sold. Vincent pointed out landmarks as they rode, clearly more relaxed now that they were on his home territory. "That is the Pecos River about 3 miles east. Val Verde sits right on the edge of it, good water year-round. My ranch is upstream, better grazing. We should make it home by tomorrow evening if we keep a steady pace." Home. He kept using that word, and each time, Penelope felt it settling more comfortably into her mind. Whatever waited in Val Verde, it would be her home too, for better or worse. They made camp that night beside a small creek, and Vincent surprised her by producing a battered tin pan from his saddlebag. "There should be fish in this water. You ever cleaned a fish?" "No, but I can learn." Within an hour they had caught 3 decent-sized catfish, and Vincent showed Penelope how to gut and clean them. It was messy, smelly work, but she attacked it with determination. By the time the fish were cooking over the fire, wrapped in wet leaves the way Vincent had demonstrated, her hands were scraped and fishy, but she felt oddly accomplished. Not bad for a first attempt. Vincent handed her a canteen to wash her hands. "Most people squirm more than you did." "I've gutted chickens before. Fish are not so different." Penelope scrubbed at her fingers, trying to get the worst of the smell off. "My mother taught me before she died. She said a woman who could not feed herself was a woman at the mercy of others. I guess she was right about that." "She sounds like she was a smart woman." "She was. I wish she had lived long enough to see me grown. Maybe things would have been different. Maybe my father would not have fallen apart the way he did." Penelope stared into the fire, watching the fish sizzle and smoke. Or maybe he always had it in him to be weak, and her death just gave him an excuse. Vincent was quiet for a moment. "My mother used to say that people show you who they really are when things get hard. Some people rise up and some people crumble. It is not a judgment, just a fact. Your father crumbled. That is on him, not you." "I know that in my head." Penelope tapped her temple. "But in my heart, I keep wondering if I could have done something different, been a better daughter, worked harder, somehow saved him from himself." "You could not have." Vincent's voice was firm. "I know because I tried to save my mother. After my father died, she just faded away. Stopped eating, stopped caring. I did everything I could think of, but in the end, she chose to let go. I was angry about it for years, thought I had failed her. But eventually, I realized that her choice was not about me. It was about her own pain being too much to carry. Same with your father. His weakness is not your failure." Penelope looked at him across the fire and saw understanding in his eyes, the kind that only came from walking through the same dark places. "How did you stop being angry?" "I am not sure I did completely, but I put it to work instead of letting it eat me alive. Every nail I hammer into the ranch house, every calf I deliver, every acre of grass I protect, that is me proving that I am stronger than the grief, that I can build something good even after everything I lost. Maybe that is what you need to do too, build something good. I think I would like that." Penelope felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes but refused to let them fall. She had cried enough over the past months. Now was the time to be strong, to be the person Vincent seemed to think she could be. "Teach me. Teach me how to build a life that means something. Already started." Vincent smiled and reached for the cooked fish, carefully unwrapping the leaves. "First lesson, do not let yourself starve. Now eat. You are going to need your strength for what comes next." The fish was delicious, tender and flaky with a smoky flavor from the fire. They ate with their fingers, licking the grease away and laughing when Penelope nearly dropped a piece. It was such a simple moment, sharing a meal under the stars with nothing but the crackle of fire and the distant song of crickets, but it felt important somehow. Like a promise being made without words. After they finished eating, Vincent pulled out a harmonica from his pocket and played a few slow, melancholy tunes. Penelope leaned back against her saddle and listened, letting the music wash over her. It spoke of loneliness and longing but also of hope, and she thought it might be the most beautiful thing she had ever heard. "Where did you learn to play?" she asked when he finally paused. "My father taught me before he left for the war. He said music was the one thing that could not be taken from you, that even if you lost everything else, you would still have songs." Vincent turned the harmonica over in his hands, the metal glinting in the firelight. "He died before I got very good, but I kept practicing. Figured it was a way to keep him with me." "Play something happy," Penelope requested. "Something that sounds like sunshine." Vincent laughed, a warm rumble that did strange things to her insides and launched into a lively jig that made her toes tap despite herself. Before she knew what she was doing, Penelope was on her feet, swaying to the music, her body moving of its own accord. She had not danced in years, not since before her mother died, but the steps came back to her as if they had been waiting just beneath her skin. Vincent stopped playing to watch her, his eyes wide with surprise and something else, something heated that made Penelope's cheeks flush. She froze mid-step, suddenly self-conscious. "Sorry, I should not have. Do not apologize." Vincent stood, tucking the harmonica into his pocket. "Dance if you want to dance. God knows there has been little enough joy in your life lately. Take it where you can find it." Emboldened by his words, Penelope held out her hand. "Then dance with me. Unless cowboys do not dance, this cowboy does." Vincent took her hand, his grip warm and strong, and pulled her close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Though I should warn you, I am better with cattle than I am with footwork." He was lying. Vincent moved with easy grace, leading her through a simple waltz pattern that suited the open space and lack of music. Penelope followed, her hand on his shoulder, their bodies finding a rhythm that felt natural despite the strangeness of the situation. They were master and servant, owner and owned, but in this moment under the vast Texas sky, they were just two people dancing in the firelight. "You are full of surprises, Penelope Carson," Vincent murmured, his breath stirring the hair at her temple. "Every time I think I have you figured out, you show me something new. Is that a good thing?" "It is a very good thing." His hand tightened slightly at her waist. "I do not like boring." They danced until the fire burned low and exhaustion pulled at Penelope's limbs. When Vincent finally released her, she felt bereft, as if something precious had been taken away. But he was already moving toward the bedrolls, the moment over, and she had no choice but to follow. That night, wrapped in her blankets, Penelope could not stop replaying the feel of Vincent's hand in hers, the solid strength of his shoulder under her palm, the way his eyes had softened when he looked at her. It was dangerous to feel this way about him, dangerous to let her heart get tangled up with gratitude and proximity, and the simple fact that he had been kind when he could have been cruel. But her heart seemed to have ideas of its own, and as she drifted toward sleep, she found herself hoping that maybe, just maybe, Vincent's feelings were beginning to mirror her own. They reached Val Verde in the late afternoon of the following day, and Penelope's first impression was of a town that was smaller than she had imagined, but somehow more substantial. The buildings lining the main street were well maintained, the dirt road wide and clear. People moved about their business with purpose, calling greetings to each other with easy familiarity. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, for better or worse. Vincent led the horse down the main street, nodding to the people who waved or called out to him. A few curious glances landed on Penelope, but no one was outright rude. At the general store, a lanky man with a salt and pepper beard grinned wide. "Vincent Frost, back from your mysterious journey, and who is this pretty thing?" "Penelope Carson, my new housekeeper." "Penelope, this is Walter Green, owner of the general store and the town's biggest gossip." Walter laughed good-naturedly. "Guilty as charged. Welcome to Val Verde, Miss Carson. If you need anything, my store has got it, and if I do not have it, I can order it. Fair prices, honest weights, and only moderate nosiness. Thank you, Mr. Green." Penelope managed a small smile. "It is nice to be here." They continued on toward the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to open land. About 20 minutes later, Vincent guided the horse up a long drive that led to a sprawling ranch house built of weathered wood and stone. It was not fancy, but it looked solid and well kept, with a wide porch and shutters on the windows. Behind the house, Penelope could see a barn, several outbuildings, and miles of fenced pasture where cattle grazed lazily in the afternoon sun. "This is it." Vincent dismounted and reached up to help Penelope down. His hands spanned her waist, and for a moment they stood very close, her hands on his shoulders for balance. Their eyes met, and Penelope's breath caught at the intensity she saw in his gaze. Then Vincent stepped back, breaking the contact, and grabbed their bags from the horse. "Come on, I will show you around." The inside of the house was as practical as the outside, with simple furniture and clean lines. The main room held a large fireplace, a worn couch, and a wooden table with 6 chairs. The kitchen was spacious, with a good stove and plenty of counter space. Upstairs, there were 4 bedrooms, and Vincent showed her to the one that had belonged to Mrs. Patterson. "You can fix it up however you like. I will have the hands bring in your trunk once we unpack the horse." He lingered in the doorway, looking almost uncertain. "I know it is not much, but it is yours for as long as you are here." "It is perfect." And it was. The room had a real bed with a quilt, a wardrobe, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the pastures. It was more than Penelope had dared to hope for. "Thank you, Vincent, for all of this." "For everything. You have thanked me enough." But Vincent smiled as he said it. "Now get settled. Supper is in about 2 hours. The hands will want to meet you, and I am sure they will be on their best behavior since I told them I would fire anyone who stepped out of line." After he left, Penelope sank onto the bed and let herself feel the full weight of the past 2 weeks. She had gone from being sold on an auction block to having her own room in a ranch house in Texas, from being property to being a person with a future. And at the center of it all was Vincent Frost, the cowboy who had looked at her with snowflakes melting on her face and decided she deserved sunshine. She was falling for him. The realization settled over her like the warm Texas air, undeniable and slightly terrifying. It was too soon, too complicated, too risky. But the heart wanted what it wanted, and Penelope's heart wanted the man who had saved her, who had treated her with respect and kindness, who had danced with her under the stars and played her songs on a battered harmonica. The question was whether Vincent felt the same, and if he did, whether either of them would be brave enough to act on it. Supper that evening was a lively affair. The three ranch hands, Miguel, Charlie, and Tom, were indeed on their best behavior, greeting Penelope politely and complimenting the simple meal of beans, cornbread, and bacon that she managed to throw together from the pantry supplies. Miguel was in his 40s, with weathered brown skin and kind eyes. Charlie was barely 20, lanky and shy. Tom was somewhere in between, built like a bull and quieter than the others but friendly enough. "It is mighty good to have proper cooking again," Miguel said, accepting a second helping of beans. No offense to the boss, but his meals were barely fit for the hogs. "I never claimed to be a cook." Vincent did not look offended. "That is why I went to get Penelope." "Now you all will stop complaining about the food." "We were not complaining," Tom protested. "We were merely stating facts." The easy banter made Penelope feel more at ease. These men clearly liked and respected Vincent, and they seemed willing to extend that courtesy to her. As the evening wore on and the dishes were cleared, Charlie pulled out a fiddle and played a few tunes while Miguel told stories about his years working various ranches. It felt almost like family, and Penelope found herself relaxing in a way she had not in years. Later, after the hands had retired to the bunkhouse and Penelope had finished cleaning the kitchen, Vincent walked her upstairs to her room. They paused outside her door, the hallway dim with only a single lamp burning. "Thank you for giving them a good meal," Vincent said quietly. "And for being patient with their roughness. They mean well. They are good men, I can tell." Penelope twisted her hands together, suddenly nervous. "Vincent, I just want you to know that I am grateful for this chance. I will work hard and make sure you do not regret bringing me here." "I already know I will not regret it." Vincent reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek for just a moment. "Sleep well, Penelope. Tomorrow, your new life really begins." He turned and walked to his own room at the end of the hall, leaving Penelope standing with her hand pressed to the spot where his fingers had been, her heart racing like a wild thing in her chest. The next weeks fell into a pattern that felt almost like the normal life Penelope had always craved. She woke early to make breakfast for Vincent and the hands, then spent her days cleaning the house, tending the vegetable garden, feeding the chickens, and preparing meals. The work was hard but satisfying, and she went to bed each night physically exhausted but mentally content. Vincent was a constant presence, always nearby but never intrusive. He taught her how to milk the cow, how to collect eggs without getting pecked, how to preserve vegetables for the winter. They worked side by side, their conversations ranging from practical matters about the ranch to deeper discussions about their pasts, their hopes, their fears. With each passing day, Penelope felt herself falling deeper under his spell, drawn to his quiet strength and the gentleness he showed to everything under his care, from the smallest calf to the woman he had bought off an auction block. She saw the way he looked at her sometimes, when he thought she was not paying attention, saw the hunger in his eyes quickly shuttered, the way his hands would clench when she stood close. He wanted her, she was almost certain, but he was holding back because of the contract, because of the power imbalance, because he was too honorable to take advantage of someone in her position. It made her want him even more. One evening in late January, about 6 weeks after their arrival in Val Verde, a winter storm rolled in unexpectedly. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in as many minutes, and the wind howled around the ranch house like a living thing. Vincent sent the hands to secure the barn and the animals, while he and Penelope hurried to close shutters and bank the fires. "This is a bad one," Vincent said, peering out the window at the swirling darkness. "The hands will stay in the bunkhouse tonight. We should be fine in here as long as the chimney does not clog." They huddled in the main room as the storm raged outside, the fire crackling cheerfully in defiance of the cold. Penelope wrapped herself in a quilt and watched the flames dance, thinking about another storm, another night when snow had fallen on her face as she stood on an auction block and waited for her life to end. "What are you thinking about?" Vincent asked from his spot on the couch. "The day you bought me, how cold I was, how scared." Penelope pulled the quilt tighter. "And how you promised me sunshine. You kept that promise, Vincent. This life you have given me, it is more than I dreamed possible." Vincent was quiet for a long moment. Then he rose and crossed to where she sat on the floor by the fire. He lowered himself beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. "I need to tell you something." His voice was rough, almost hesitant. "And I need you to know that nothing has to change, that I will not hold it against you or treat you differently if you do not feel the same. But I cannot keep lying to myself about what I feel." Penelope's heart began to pound. "What do you feel?" Vincent turned to face her, and the expression in his eyes made her breath catch. "I am falling in love with you, Penelope. Maybe I started falling that first day when I saw you standing there with snow melting on your face, looking like you wanted to disappear. Or maybe it happened slowly, over campfires and conversations and watching you bring life back to this house. But it is happening, and I cannot stop it, and I do not want to. I know it is wrong. I know the contract makes any relationship between us complicated and probably improper. But I had to tell you the truth." Joy exploded in Penelope's chest, so fierce and bright it almost hurt. "It is not wrong, not if I feel the same way. And I do, Vincent, I love you. I think I have been falling in love with you since you wrapped your coat around me and carried me away from that terrible place. You saved me, but more than that, you gave me back myself. You made me believe I could be strong again, could build something good. How could I not love you for that?" Vincent's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone with infinite tenderness. "I bought your contract. I own your labor. How can you be sure this is real and not just gratitude or obligation? Because when I look at you, I feel things that have nothing to do with contracts or obligations. Because I want to know everything about you, want to be near you, want to share my life with you, not because I have to, but because I cannot imagine doing anything else." Penelope covered his hand with her own. "I am sure, Vincent, as sure as I have ever been about anything. Then to hell with propriety." Vincent leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, but Penelope met him halfway. Their lips touched gently at first, a question and an answer all at once. Then Vincent's other hand slid into her hair and the kiss deepened, becoming something hungry and desperate and utterly right. Penelope had been kissed before, clumsy fumbling with boys behind barns when she was younger, but this was different. This was Vincent's mouth moving over hers with purpose, Vincent's tongue teasing at her lips until she opened for him, Vincent's hands holding her like she was precious and breakable and strong all at once. She made a small sound of pleasure and felt him smile against her mouth. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. "I want to do this right. Court you proper, even if the circumstances are strange. I want everyone to know that you are not just my housekeeper, that you matter to me, that I am serious about a future together. I want that too. Penelope kissed him again, quick and sweet. But we have time. We have all the time in the world now. Outside, the storm continued to rage. But inside, wrapped in Vincent's arms by the warm fire, Penelope felt only sunshine. The girl who had been sold with snowflakes on her face was gone, and in her place was a woman who had been given a second chance at life and love. A woman who was going to grab that chance with both hands and never let go. The storm passed by morning, leaving the world crystalline and clean. Vincent and Penelope emerged from the house to find the ranch blanketed in a thin layer of ice that sparkled in the early sunlight. The hands were already up, breaking ice out of the water troughs and checking on the cattle. When Miguel saw Vincent and Penelope standing close together on the porch, his weathered face broke into a knowing grin. "About time, boss. We were wondering how long you two were going to dance around each other." "You knew," Vincent sounded surprised. "We all knew." Charlie piped up from near the barn. "You look at her like she hung the moon, and she blushes every time you come near. We are cowboys, not blind." Penelope felt her face heat, but Vincent just laughed and pulled her closer against his side. "Well then, I guess it is official. Penelope and I are courting. Anyone got a problem with that?" "None at all," Tom called. "Just do not expect us to play chaperone. We got work to do." The days that followed were some of the happiest Penelope had ever known. Vincent courted her with old-fashioned determination, bringing her wildflowers from the pasture, playing songs on his harmonica just for her, taking her on evening rides to watch the sunset over the endless Texas plains. He kissed her in the barn, in the garden, on the porch under the stars, each kiss a promise of more to come. But he never pushed for more than she was willing to give, never tried to take advantage of their situation. He was determined, he told her one night, to prove that their relationship was built on more than just the contract that bound her to him. He wanted her to know beyond any doubt that she had a choice, that she was free to walk away if she wished, even though the thought of losing her gutted him. Penelope appreciated his restraint even as it frustrated her. She wanted more of him, wanted everything, but she also understood his need to do right by her. So she contented herself with stolen kisses and long conversations and the building anticipation of a future they would share. In March, Vincent rode into town and came back with a small velvet box. That evening, he led Penelope out to the porch where they had stood together so many times before and dropped to one knee. "I know we have not been together long. I know the circumstances that brought us here are complicated. But I also know that I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Not as master and servant, not because of some contract, but as husband and wife, as partners in every sense of the word. Penelope Carson, will you marry me?" The ring was simple, a silver band with a small diamond that caught the fading sunlight and threw rainbows across the porch. It was the most beautiful thing Penelope had ever seen. "Yes." The word came out choked with tears of joy. "Yes, Vincent, I will marry you. I will be your wife and your partner and everything else you want me to be." Vincent slid the ring onto her finger and stood, sweeping her into his arms and spinning her around until she was dizzy with laughter. "I tore up your contract this morning. You are free, Penelope, completely free. You are marrying me because you want to, not because you have to." Penelope kissed him hard, pouring all her love and gratitude and hope into it. When they finally broke apart, she whispered against his lips, "I have been free since the day you looked at me with snowflakes on my face and promised me sunshine. Everything else was just paperwork." They were married in early April, just as the wildflowers began to bloom across the Texas prairie. The ceremony took place in the small church in Val Verde, with the whole town in attendance. Miguel stood up as Vincent's best man, and Mrs. Hernandez, who had made the trip from Santa Fe for the occasion, stood with Penelope. The preacher spoke about love and commitment and building a life together, and Penelope barely heard a word of it because she could not take her eyes off Vincent's face. He looked at her like she was his whole world, like nothing else existed beyond this moment and this promise. When it came time to exchange vows, his voice was steady and sure. "I promise to love you, to protect you, to stand beside you through every storm and every sunny day. I promise to make you laugh, to dry your tears, to build a life with you that is better than anything either of us dared to dream. You are my heart, Penelope, and I will spend the rest of my days proving that to you." Penelope's own vows came through tears. "I promise to love you with everything I have, to be your partner and your friend, to fill our home with warmth and joy. You saved me when I thought I was beyond saving, and you showed me that I was strong enough to build a new life. I will never stop being grateful for that, and I will never stop loving you. You are my sunshine, Vincent, and I will walk in your light forever." When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Vincent pulled Penelope close and kissed her thoroughly, to the cheers and applause of everyone gathered. It was perfect, exactly the kind of beginning they deserved. The celebration afterward was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and more food than Penelope had ever seen in one place. People ate and drank, and danced to the music provided by Charlie's fiddle and 2 other musicians from town. Vincent danced with his bride 3 times, scandalously close, before Miguel cut in and claimed a turn. "You did good, girl," Miguel said as he twirled her around. "The boss is a good man, but he needed someone to share his life with. I am glad it is you." "So am I," Penelope said, watching Vincent laugh at something Walter Green was saying. "So am I." As the sun set and the party continued, Vincent stole Penelope away from the crowd and led her on a walk down toward the river. They stood on the bank, watching the water flow past, and Vincent wrapped his arms around her from behind. "Are you happy?" he asked softly. "Happier than I ever thought possible." Penelope leaned back against his chest. "When I was standing on that auction block with snow falling on my face, I never imagined this. Never imagined I could have a home, a husband, a real life. But you gave me all of that. You gave it to yourself." Vincent turned her in his arms so they were face to face. "You had the strength to survive, to start over, to open your heart again after everything you had been through. All I did was give you a chance. You did the hard work of becoming who you are now. Then, we will say we did it together." Penelope pulled his head down for a long, sweet kiss. "And we will keep doing it together, for the rest of our lives." They made their way back to the party as dusk deepened into full dark. The lanterns had been lit, casting a warm glow over the celebration, and someone had started up a lively reel that had half the town dancing. Vincent and Penelope joined them, laughing and spinning under the stars, surrounded by friends and well-wishers and the endless open sky. Later that night, after the last guest had departed and the ranch was quiet again, Vincent carried Penelope over the threshold of their home. He set her down gently in their bedroom, the one they would now share, and cupped her face in his hands. "I love you, Mrs. Frost. I love you, Mr. Frost." Penelope reached up to undo his collar, her fingers trembling slightly with anticipation and nervousness. Show me how much." Vincent's kiss was answer enough, but he spent the rest of the night proving it with his hands and his mouth and the gentle, thorough way he made love to her. Penelope gave herself over to it completely, to him completely, and felt the last of her old fears and hurts finally burn away in the heat of their joining. When she finally fell asleep, wrapped in Vincent's arms with her head on his chest. She felt truly safe for the first time in years. The months that followed were a time of settling into married life. Penelope learned the rhythms of the ranch through the changing seasons, the back-breaking work of spring branding and the long, hot days of summer. She planted a bigger garden and expanded the chicken coop, determined to make their home as self-sufficient as possible. Vincent taught her to ride properly, and she taught him which herbs to use for what ailments after ordering books on the subject from Walter's store. They fought sometimes, quick flare-ups about money or chores or whose turn it was to deal with a particular problem, but they always made up before bed, both stubborn about not going to sleep angry. And they loved fiercely, stealing moments alone whenever they could, learning each other's bodies and hearts with the dedication of scholars studying a favorite subject. In August, Penelope realized her monthly courses were late. She waited another week to be sure, then told Vincent one evening after supper. He stared at her for a long moment, his face going through a dozen emotions too quick to name, before letting out a whoop of joy and picking her up to spin her around. "We are having a baby." His hands were gentle as he set her down, one coming to rest on her still flat stomach. "You are sure?" "As sure as I can be without seeing the doctor. But yes, Vincent, I think we are having a baby." Penelope covered his hand with her own. "You are going to be a father. And you are going to be a mother." Vincent's eyes were suspiciously bright as he kissed her. "Our child is going to be so loved, so wanted. Everything will be different for them than it was for us." "Yes," Penelope agreed softly. "Everything will be different." The pregnancy was not easy. Penelope spent the first 3 months sick more often than not, barely able to keep food down. Vincent fussed over her like a mother hen, to the amusement of the ranch hands, but Penelope found his attention sweet rather than smothering. As her belly grew, he insisted she do less of the heavy work around the ranch, hiring a local girl to help with the cooking and cleaning over Penelope's protests. "You are carrying our child," Vincent said firmly. "Let someone else scrub the floors." In February, nearly a year to the day after she had been sold on that auction block in the snow, Penelope went into labor. It was long and brutal, hours of pain that seemed like it would never end. But Vincent stayed by her side the entire time, letting her squeeze his hands until they were bruised and wiping the sweat from her forehead. When the baby finally came in the early hours of the morning, Doc Harper held up a squalling, red-faced infant and announced, "You got yourself a boy, Vincent. A healthy boy." Penelope burst into tears as Vincent laid their son in her arms. He was perfect, tiny and wrinkled and perfect, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that would probably turn green like his father's. She traced a finger over his little face, marveling at the miracle of him. "Hello, sweetheart," she whispered. "Welcome to the world. You are going to know nothing but love, I promise you, nothing but sunshine and love." Vincent leaned over them both, his own eyes wet. What should we call him? They had discussed names for months but never settled on one. Now, looking down at her son, Penelope knew. Samuel Henry Frost. "After your father and mine, the good they could have been if they had lived." Samuel Henry Frost. Vincent tested the name, then nodded. "I like it. Welcome to the family, Samuel. You just made your mother and me the happiest people in Texas." The next weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and constant feedings, of learning how to be parents and watching their son grow stronger each day. The ranch hands were surprisingly helpful, taking turns rocking Samuel when Penelope needed a break and teaching him cowboy songs even though he was far too young to understand. Miguel carved him a little wooden horse, and Charlie knitted a blanket with uneven stitches but a lot of love. As spring arrived again, bringing wildflowers and warm breezes, Penelope stood on the porch with Samuel in her arms and Vincent beside her. She looked out over the land they had built a life on, the land where they had fallen in love and gotten married and started a family, and felt contentment settle over her like a blessing. "What are you thinking about?" Vincent asked, sliding an arm around her waist. "About how far we have come." "About snowflakes and sunshine." Penelope turned to kiss him softly. "About how I used to think I had no future, and now I cannot imagine wanting anything more than what I have right here." "We are lucky," Vincent agreed, "both of us, but we also fought for this, worked for this, chose this." "That makes it mean something." Samuel fussed in Penelope's arms and she shifted him to her shoulder, patting his back. "Do you think we will have more children, as many as you want?" Vincent kissed the top of her head. "I want to fill this house with noise and laughter. Want our children to grow up knowing they are loved and wanted and safe. Want to give them everything we did not have. Then we will." Penelope looked up at her husband, at the man who had saved her and loved her and built a life with her, and smiled. "We will fill this house with children, and this land with cattle, and our hearts with joy. And every day, I will thank whatever twist of fate led me to that auction block where you were waiting. Every day, I will thank whatever made me brave enough to bid." Vincent kissed her again, longer this time. "I love you, Penelope Frost. I will love you until the day I die and probably long after that. And I will love you just as long." Penelope felt Samuel settle against her, his baby warmth and wait a reminder of the future they were building together. "Forever and ever, my cowboy. Forever and ever." The years rolled on in Val Verde, each one bringing its own challenges and joys. Samuel grew into a sturdy boy with his father's green eyes and his mother's determination. When he was 3, Penelope had twin girls, Rebecca and Rose, who were born on a hot July night and immediately wrapped their parents around their tiny fingers. 2 years later came another boy, Michael, who was quiet where Samuel was boisterous but just as loved. The ranch prospered under Vincent's careful management. He expanded the herd and bought more land, eventually employing 6 permanent hands and hiring seasonal workers during busy times. Penelope took over the books, discovering she had a head for numbers that helped them save money and plan for the future. Together, they became respected members of the Val Verde community, known for their hard work and their devotion to each other and their growing family. Miguel stayed on as foreman until he was too old to work, then retired to a little house in town that Vincent bought for him. Charlie eventually married the girl Vincent had hired to help Penelope and started his own small ranch on land Vincent sold him at a generous price. Tom moved on to bigger opportunities in Wyoming but came back to visit every few years, always welcome at the Frost Ranch. Penelope stayed in touch with Mrs. Hernandez, who had become a friend and confidant. They wrote letters back and forth, sharing news and recipes and the small details of their lives. Once a year, Vincent would take Penelope and the children to Santa Fe for a visit, and Mrs. Hernandez would spoil the children with sweets while the adults caught up properly. Vincent never spoke of his sister Mary again after learning she had died in childbirth 3 years after the wedding. The news had devastated him, and Penelope had held him while he grieved for the little sister he had raised and lost. But he channeled that grief into being the best father he could be, determined that his children would never know the kind of loss he had experienced. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Vincent surprised Penelope with a trip, just the 2 of them, while the children stayed with a trusted family in town. He took her to San Antonio, where they stayed in a real hotel and ate in fancy restaurants and danced to live music every night. On their last evening, as they walked along the river, Vincent stopped and pulled Penelope close. "You ever regret it? Marrying me, tying yourself to this life?" Penelope looked up at him, surprised. Never, not for a single second. Why would you ask that? Because I took away your choices at first. Because you have worked so hard, raising our children and running the house and keeping the books. Because sometimes I wonder if you ever wish you had been free to choose a different path. Vincent's voice was uncharacteristically uncertain. Vincent Frost, you listened to me. Penelope grabbed his face in both hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. You did not take away my choices. You gave me choices, real ones, for the first time in my life. And every single day since I met you, I have chosen this. Chosen you. Chosen our family and our ranch and our life together. I was sold with snowflakes on my face, but you showed me sunshine, and I have walked in that sunshine ever since. There is nowhere else I would rather be and no one else I would rather be with. Do you understand? I understand. Vincent kissed her deeply, right there on the public street, not caring who saw. I love you. I will never stop loving you. Good. Because I will never stop loving you either. Penelope grinned and took his hand. Now take me back to that hotel room and remind me why I married you. Vincent laughed and did exactly that. 20 years after that snowy day in the mountain pass, Penelope stood in the same spot on the porch where she had stood so many times before. She was 40 now, with silver threading through her dark hair and lines around her eyes from years of squinting against the Texas sun. But she was healthy and happy, surrounded by the life she and Vincent had built together. Samuel was 21, working the ranch alongside his father and courting a sweet girl from town. Rebecca and Rose were 19, both beautiful and bright, helping their mother run the household and making their own plans for the future. Michael was 17, quieter than his siblings but no less loved, with a gift for horses that made him invaluable on the ranch. Vincent came up behind her, his hair more gray than brown now, but his eyes still the same startling green. His arms wrapped around her waist, and she leaned back against him with the ease of long familiarity. "What are you thinking about?" He asked the same question he had asked 1,000 times over the years. "About beginnings and endings," Penelope said softly. "About how scared I was that day when I stood on that auction block. About how you looked at me and saw something worth saving when I could barely see anything in myself. About all the years since then, all the moments big and small that have made up our life together." "We have had a good life," Vincent agreed. "A damn good life. The best life." Penelope turned in his arms to face him. "And it is not over yet. We still have years ahead of us, years to watch our children grow and maybe meet grandchildren and keep building this place we love. You promised me sunshine, Vincent Frost, and you have given me nothing but bright days ever since. Even when it rained," Vincent's lips quirked in a smile, "especially when it rained because we weathered those storms together." Penelope kissed him, soft and sweet. "I was sold with snowflakes on my face, but you told me I would only know sunshine from then on. And you were right. You were right about everything." "Not everything," Vincent corrected gently. "I was right about you being strong. I was right about us being good together. But you were right about so much more. You were right that love is a choice we make every day. You were right that family is what we build, not just what we are born into. You were right that the past does not have to define the future. You taught me those things, Penelope. You made me a better man." "Then we made each other better," Penelope said. "That is what love does. It takes two broken people and helps them heal each other, helps them build something stronger together than they ever could have alone." From inside the house came the sound of laughter as their children argued good-naturedly about something. Out in the pasture, cattle lowed contentedly. The sun was setting over the endless Texas plains, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose and deep purple. It was an ordinary evening on an ordinary day, but to Penelope, it was everything. This was the life she had been given when a cowboy looked at her with snowflakes melting on her face and decided she deserved better. This was the future she had built with hard work and determination and love. This was home, real and solid and hers in a way nothing had ever been before. And as Vincent pulled her close and they stood together watching the sunset, Penelope knew with absolute certainty that she had finally found her place in the world. Not because someone had sold her or bought her or claimed ownership of her labor, but because she had chosen to build a life here with a man who saw her as an equal, a partner, a beloved. The girl who had stood on that auction block in the bitter cold was gone, transformed into a woman who knew her own strength and worth. A woman who had learned that love was not something to fear, but something to embrace with both hands. A woman who had walked out of the snow and into the sunshine and never looked back. "I love you," Penelope whispered against Vincent's chest. "Thank you for saving me." "I love you," Vincent whispered back. "Thank you for letting me." And as the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, they stood together on the porch of their home, surrounded by the life they had created, and felt nothing but gratitude for the strange and wonderful twist of fate that had brought them together. The snowflakes were long gone, melted away by the warmth of a Texas sun and a cowboy's love. In their place was only light, endless and bright and full of promise. Only sunshine, just as Vincent had promised. Only sunshine, forever and always.